Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to all of you who are joining our live event this afternoon entitled Education, Does the System Need Modernising? My name is Rob Leach, Executive Head Teacher at My Online Schooling, and I will be your host this afternoon. At our previous event in May, we looked at education in a post-pandemic world and discussed how the education sector has changed in the last 2 years and what those changes could mean for the future of education too. 3 months later, and a new school year is now almost upon us. Most children are already enrolled in their next school, be it traditional bricks and mortar, online, or a hybrid of both. However, the years roll past quickly, and this time next year, a whole new cohort will have chosen the type of school that they want to enrol into, and lots of parents amongst us will be looking at options for our own children in the near future. Therefore, today we will be looking at the benefits and challenges of both online and in-person education, how one influences the other, and how they can combine to create a hybrid experience. We will round up the session today with our panel of experts answering your questions. I am now delighted to introduce you to that panel who are joining me today. Chi Ribbons-Opara, Vice Principal at a school in Tunbridge Wells in Kent, in England. My Online Schooling's very own Head of Art and Design, Rachel Adams. And Jet Van Dyke, a parent whose daughter Ginger attends My Online Schooling. Welcome to everybody on the panel. I can't wait to hear your thoughts and your insight as we go through the discussion today. As I mentioned, after watching our main discussion, our guests will be answering your questions. So please do get in touch whilst you're watching using the Q&A box below the media player on your screens. Post any and as many questions as you like, and we will have time dedicated at the end to go through each one. We would also like to make the event today as interactive as possible. And our guests would like to hear your views on those key topics of discussion. So we want to start today by asking you a number of questions as polls. So there'll be a number of questions throughout the session today, and you should see a poll next to the video appearing. And we're going to start with our first question, a simple but important one. Do you think that pupils are more likely to make academic progress in an online school compared to a traditional physical school? So that is the first question that we are asking you as our audience today to contribute to. Really keen to see what that result is later in the discussion. And whilst we await your answers, I'd like to start our event today by hearing about our guests' experiences in education. We are really lucky this afternoon to have both physical and virtual schools represented, which will set us up for an interesting and informed discussion. So Chi Ribbons-Opara, I'd like to start with you. Thank you for joining us today, Chi. You have nearly 20 years of experience in traditional education. What are your experiences of in-person teaching?
Yes, thank you, Rob. I have been a classroom teacher for 17 years, a little over 17 years now. And personally, reflecting on the experience, I think for me, there was a huge shift, quite a selfish one here, but significantly a huge shift the first time that I entered the classroom. So I had very limited experience of being in a school before. I had some experience, but quite limited before I entered the classroom as a teacher. And I went into the profession through the graduate teacher program. So it was pretty much full on straight away into the classroom and teaching. By October I was teaching, I think. And so for me, moving from experiencing young people, particularly in groups, maybe at the bus stop or in sort of informal environments, to then coming in and being surrounded down the corridor by a huge number of young people, encountering them in the canteen, in the classroom. For me personally, in my understanding of how young people interact and where they're coming from and being more sympathetic towards them, that was quite significant for me, that physical change. Also, we then went into the training process and being taught how to control your environment in terms of seating plans or sort of getting the mood of the classroom to where you wanted it, and being able to walk around the classroom and look at students while they were working and support them while they're working in that sort of instant formative way was very important for me. It has been very important for me as well. And I suppose one of the more significant things that people comment on, which is the social interaction aspect of it, where being a form tutor from when I started and having students drop in or having, again, watching how students interact with each other and them growing as a result of those experiences with each other. For me, those have been all quite positive aspects of being a physical classroom teacher.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What a range of experiences as well, Chi. And you're right, aren't you? Teaching in any context, people sometimes, I think, don't understand sometimes the amount of things that you're juggling in a classroom. It's not just, talking at young people. It's the checking on progress. It's the mood of the room, as you put it. It's behaviour management. It's all of those. It's such a skillful profession, isn't it? Whether you're in a physical school or a virtual one. Which brings me nicely on to you, Rachel, because you also have many years of teaching experience, but interestingly, you transitioned from in-person teaching to teaching virtually. How do they compare, and how did you find that change?
Yes, thanks, Rob, and thanks, Chi. That was really interesting to hear you there. Yes, I've been lucky enough to work across a number of different settings, both in a traditional bricks and mortar environment and obviously online now. And what has become apparent to me, and I think isn't always apparent to people who have not taught online or whose perhaps young people have not attended online, is just in many cases just how similar they can be, and just the same kind of environment that we actually do have online. It is very surprising to people. So our pupils, I've found, we have a lovely atmosphere. We get to know each other very well. Very surprisingly, just how quickly we do get to know each other and build those relationships. There are, as I say, lots of similarities there. We have form time, we have a common room where pupils can get together and meet and socialise. We have obviously lesson objectives that we go through during every lesson with pupils, and they're sort of the similar elements, if you like, to a traditional school, in my experience. Obviously, we don't physically walk around a classroom, but we do that virtually throughout the classroom, where we will be able to see pupils working, and we have breakout rooms where we can just jump in and talk to pupils one-to-one, maybe if they're struggling a little bit, or if they'd like a little bit of one-to-one time to talk through something. Then we don't have a whole classroom around watching or listening to the conversation. We can do that privately. But some of the other different elements, I think, are things like perhaps disruption. Sometimes in bricks and mortar schools, I have worked in a school that is in one of the most deprived areas of the country here. And so there could be quite a bit of disruption going on in the classroom. There would have to be very strong classroom management. And unfortunately, obviously, at times that could impact on the progress within the classroom. Obviously, we're in a position online where, in general, we don't have that kind of disruption. We just don't have it. If there is any kind of disruption, then obviously we've got a process in place to deal with that and to support pupils with that, but it just doesn't tend to happen. And various different other elements like differentiation, which sometimes can be a bit more challenging in a bricks and mortar school. So for example, in previous traditional settings, I've had to book ICT rooms to use, or move classrooms if there's an issue in the classroom. Pupils have to move between classrooms, and there's that time where things can go on in corridors, and there can be a bit of a loud entry into the classroom, shall we say, which is all part of working in a bricks and mortar school and can add to that atmosphere. But online, our pupils are in the classroom straight away. As soon as they enter, we can get on with the lesson. Obviously, we can have a chat about what they've been up to and build those social skills. But we don't tend to have those problems with moving to an ICT room, or if we want to, for example, run a session using a certain piece of software, then we can just do that straight away. If differentiation-wise, if we've got some pupils who finish a piece of work, then we can straight away give them some options to go and research something, experiment with software perhaps. So there's lots of different routes that we can go down, and just at the tip of our fingers, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting insight. Thank you, Rachel. And fascinating, isn't it, how so many elements are similar, of course.
Yes.
Teaching has that commonality, regardless of the context or the setting, perhaps, that you are in. And one of the things that I've noticed, having been in physical schools previously and in online school now, is that at the root of it is still that joy you get every day in education of working with young people in whatever context, whatever setting, that relationship and seeing young people experience success, whatever that means to them as an individual, is a joy, isn't it? It's what keeps us all in the profession, regardless of the type of school that we're in. I remember towards the end of last year, academic year, the My Online Schooling Has Talent competition, and seeing sort of 400 young people who were watching the final, desperate to see who was going to win. Such a joy, and the same would be true, of course, in so many physical schools where there are great opportunities for that too. That's really useful, and a good time perhaps to reflect on the outcome of the first poll this afternoon. The results of that poll are in. The question, if you remember, was, do you think pupils are more likely to make more academic progress in an online school? Interesting to see what the panel makes of these results. So we have the results in. 78% of those watching today believe that young people are more likely to make academic progress in an online school. 22% disagreeing with that, believing that'd be more likely in a physical bricks and mortar school. And it's an interesting point, Rachel, based on what you were saying in terms of the progress and the pace of teaching and learning, if you take away some of the distractions, disruptions perhaps, that you would get in some physical classrooms, some of the time at least. Perhaps those two things there are entwined. Be interesting to look perhaps at some statistics on this as well. And these statistics are from My Online Schooling and some recent GCSE results that have been published. So let's take a look at those if we can. And you'll be seeing on the screen in front of you now GCSE results, of course, across the country in the UK, but also for those sitting international GCSEs around the world, released just a few days ago. Big congratulations to all students in physical and virtual schools and hybrid schools as well on collecting their results. But you can see there quite strong academic results at My Online Schooling. That's against national averages. So within that national average, of course, there'd be a whole variety of different schools, some of which would be really high achieving and some that may have struggled as well. But interesting based on the poll that we've just had and the discussion that we've just had as well, to share those. Thank you very much. So what a great poll that was. Before we now move on to the next point of discussion, we are really keen now to show you a video of some students' artwork. And this is because we have Rachel with us, Head of Art at My Online Schooling, but also, as Chi was talking about earlier, that idea of how teachers get to monitor students' work. What does that look like? How do teachers know what students are doing if they are in a virtual school? Hopefully this video will give you an insight. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Great to see some young people and their work and their, oh, Rachel, you must be a very proud head of department as well, looking at some of the work that those young people have pulled together. Fantastic. And that leads us nicely into the next part of the discussion, which is us considering perception of online education and perception of traditional bricks and mortar teaching as well. So we have our second poll now for you. So thank you. If you respond to the first poll, please do continue to interact with us today. So the next question is, what is one model of schooling more inclusive than the other? So the options are online schools are more inclusive, physical schools are more inclusive. Really keen to see what the perception is there. And likewise, please do keep your questions coming in, as Chi, Rachel and Jet will be answering them at the end of the show today. It's always important to hear not just from our experts on the panel, but also from some families who have already made their decisions about the type of school that's right for their child. So we're keen to share with you now some of our families in our family video.
We are very excited because we are going to join my online schooling in September.
First, we considered homeschooling, but I wasn't so sure about that, and I want to give Jim the education that she deserves.
As a happy family, you kind of need that distinctive roles, and my online schooling gave that to us.
До того, как мы познакомились с My Online Schooling, я даже не предполагала, что это может быть настолько интересно и позитивно.
There's less stress. We don't have that morning school rush, which is wonderful. There's no desperate dash to get out the door at a particular time.
I decided that I think I got the right choice because the school do have sufficient breaks in between their schedules and variety project keep them engaged, and notice that their computer skills are far more better than the same age.
It has an international accreditation. It still has the whole experience of being in a classroom, and most importantly for us is that our children will be able to make friends with children all over the world.
My online schooling allows for exams to be taken, and they follow the British curriculum, which is great.
Something I really like about online school is that I can focus on the lessons I enjoy. For example, biology, where we're studying plants and photosynthesis right now.
Makes us a mobile family, so now we can travel any time of the year, anywhere in the world, without the children having to skip class.
Thank you for listening to us. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Great video there, seeing so many young people and so many families around the globe. And that leads us nicely into bringing in Jet Van Dyke, one of the parents at My Online Schooling, into the conversation today. Hello, Jet.
Good afternoon. How are you all doing?
Very well. Thank you for joining us today. Jet, I think we may have seen you in that video, in a part of that video as well, which is lovely. Yes. And great to hear from you as well. Of course, Jet, you have your daughter Ginger, who's with us at My Online Schooling. She, talking about GCSE results a moment ago, she is now going into year 11. How is she doing for her GCSE studies?
Yeah, she had a great last year, great results, and she's really looking forward to this year. She loves to study, she loves to analyze, and learning is not a problem for her, so we're lucky with that. But the most important thing is that she's happy and looking forward to doing her GCSEs.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it, that technology now allows us through virtual schools and other means to bring a British education to those based around the world, Jet. And I wonder, in terms of your experiences of that, whether or not you think that the virtual school, the online schools, whether that's going to have a desire amongst people internationally to grow, whether there's going to be more appetite from people around the world to access their education using technology.
Yes, I guess if people are interested in this way of learning and they find the websites and all the info that's available to them, as we did finding Moss, My Online Schooling, it's a little switch that you have to make, but it's so interesting and so, well, for Ginger, at least it has turned out really good. And I think once people accept that there's another way of learning instead of the brick and mortar schools, and they see how it goes and how well it is, how good it is for the children, then they'll be able to make the switch perhaps.
Yeah. And what have the benefits been for Ginger of being part of my online schooling and learning?
The arrangement of the lessons of online schooling, well, she has a lot of more time to study than in a normal school, well, in a brick and mortar school, but also to wind down. She's been in an international school before. A year and a half ago, she was still there. And it was quite a chaotic environment. And as one of the moms said in the video, also the rush in the morning. And yeah, it was chaotic and not beneficial for her. So the change has been good, but academically, especially, she's learning much quicker. The environment in the classrooms online are calm, very calm. And yeah, it's been really good for her.
That's great to hear, and I'm with you all the way. As a father to 4 young children, the early morning rush can be a stressful time. I can assure everyone of that. So that is great to hear the benefits for Ginger. What have been the challenges for Ginger as well?
The challenges, yes, the physical social interactions. Also, this is something that you can get used to and make sure there's other things where you can have that, like more sports, more time for sports, more time also to get together with friends. I wouldn't call it a challenge, but if I had to choose one, that's it. But there's there's other things that, how you say that, come in place of that. Like making friends in the online classrooms, and Jin has friends really all over the world now, which is really fun and exciting.
Yeah, a sort of global network of peers and friends for life, particularly for the 21st century economy and jobs market. That could be invaluable and great introduction experience to different cultures as well. It's an interesting point, Shia. I'm going to come back to you because you raised quite validly that point about the social interaction and socialization there too. And I suppose in terms of what you've seen, what you've heard, do you think you can get socialization online, or do you think there's a limit to that?
I think that a lot of it depends on the child. I think that a general issue that we all had during lockdown was that feeling of isolation and needing social interaction. But I think that if you have a young person who is able to connect with people, whatever the context, and connect with people, whatever the level, they will absolutely be able to deal with that. I think that if you look at the playground on the first day of school for year 7, etc., it's an interesting viewing session, isn't it? Because you see the ones that are confident enough to sort of stride out there and say, hello, I like you, you're my friend, and they wander off. And then you see the ones that take their time, people watch a little bit, and you see the ones that are just there and somebody comes up to them. So I think young people are so different, aren't they? And so I think that it depends on how the young person is comfortable socializing and making friends. And some people will latch onto that quite quickly and enjoy the process and love the fact that they have a global network of friends. And some young people might really struggle with that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's about what's right for the individual, isn't it? And different individuals with different needs will thrive potentially in different settings too. Quite right. It's always been interesting in terms of physical schools. Well, you get some great socialization, but there's also some negative socialization that sometimes people don't necessarily see or consider before they make their schooling option. And again, it's all about the individual and what's right for them. And certainly what was interesting, I suppose it'd be interesting, Jet, to get your view on this as well. Sometimes in physical schools, they're quite crowded, quite congested places. I suppose in terms of an online school, it doesn't have that same sense. It's that sense perhaps of calmness, of stability, consistency.
I can give you an example. Like the last months on that physical school, the international school here in Spain where we live, the classes got bigger, all of them, and Jin is quite sensitive also to noise. And every morning it was a struggle to get her ready, to get in the car, to go there. And sometimes she'd come home like totally exhausted. And we thought, is this puberty? Is this something else going on? But now we can see, looking back, that it had to do with the environment in the school. And she has calmed down so much, I can't even begin to tell you. Which resulted in better concentration, calming down after school and getting ready for the next day was a total different thing than the months before when she was still in the international school. So yeah, I really agree with that.
That's really interesting. Thank you very much. Great to hear a sort of live case study of how it's working for a family within an online school at the moment. Well, everyone, we now have the results of our second poll question as well. Once again, a big thank you to everyone who has responded to this. We have at the moment, in terms of the result of this poll, again, it's quite an interesting one. 71% of those who have responded today believe that online schools could be more inclusive than physical schools, and actually 29% believe in both physical and online schools can be equally as inclusive, but actually 0% on physical schools being more inclusive. I wonder, that's an interesting set of results to reflect on. Chi, I'm going to come to you as our physical school expert on the panel today. In terms of inclusivity and how inclusive a school could be to meet the needs of the individual, you would have worked, I'm sure, in some physical schools where that has been superb. But are there challenges sometimes in terms of being able to have the resources you need to meet the needs of individual students?
I think absolutely yes. There is a case to be made that in terms of inclusivity, particularly with Ginger's situation, that including her in the kind of environment that she would be more productive. So for her, if she had issues with noise, etc., then absolutely the online school would work better for her. I think that when we think about inclusivity, the needs of young people are so broad as well. So if we're thinking about inclusivity in terms of the working environment for the young person, I think what I found when we had to very quickly make the change during the lockdown was that trying to keep it level in terms of access for every single student was quite difficult. Not every student had the home environment where they could access the learning at that top level, where the physical environment became a leveler for every person in the classroom. Having said that, there are a range of needs, students with needs where actually that noise and that anxiety and that sort of worrying about the busyness of everything is not very useful. So I'm surprised at 0% though, because it must mean that people are sort of thinking about actually the people with particular sets of needs and perhaps not the others. I think I would be on the side of both having the capacity to be quite inclusive.
Yeah, and 29% of the responses were both indeed as well. Rachel, just coming to you quickly on that poll, in terms of inclusivity in the classroom and supporting individual needs of students, how do you do that in an online classroom?
Well, obviously in an online classroom, it can be quite different from in a traditional bricks and mortar school, but we get to know our pupils very well. We have a very strong wellbeing team who are always there for our pupils. And obviously as teachers, we get to know our pupils, particularly their individual needs. So just as in a bricks and mortar school, we build our lessons around those individuals, and we make sure that there is a differentiation in place, that if a particular pupil needs some time out, that, as I mentioned before, we have breakout areas where we can give them some time to do that. But we can also have one-to-one sessions where we support pupils and give them any needs, any support that they need. But certainly, yes, it is a slightly different approach to in a bricks and mortar school, but we are, very inclusive and do make sure that all students have everything at their fingertips that they need.
That's been really useful. Thank you so much, everybody. We are now going to go on to another poll question. So once again, throwing this out to everyone who is watching today. And the next poll question is this one. Really interested in this question. Will physical schools be more sustainable in the future? And will physical schools continue to be sustainable in the future as well. Really interesting question. That poll is now open for that question, so we will look forward to the answers of that poll in just a few minutes' time. Next part of the discussion, I'm really keen to get the panel's views on this. As we saw during the pandemic, the education sector had to quickly adapt to a virtual way of learning. With, in many places now, schools now back open and remaining open for the foreseeable future, is there still a place for virtual lessons, particularly cheap, perhaps in physical school contexts? Is there a hybrid way here to go, or actually is it back to the pre-pandemic teaching and learning in many physical schools?
I think absolutely there should be that hybrid nature of things. And I know that lockdown and the pandemic was sort of a glaring, very quick, very sharp, very powerful moment for society and education. But actually, I think before that we had sort of, if you think about revision sites and sort of podcast-based sites and teachers recording videos for their children, for the young people. And I know that I was doing online marking before the pandemic. So it was inching towards, it was going in that direction anyway. So I don't think that we can and should go completely back to the physical. I don't think that it's possible to do that. I think that it's very useful. I talked about the leveling process. Yes, I know I said that it leveled the environment for students to be in the classroom, but actually what it did is it taught us to improve our own systems. So doing an online exam, for instance, I know that the BMATs were on during that period and doing the online, we had to get better at the provision for the students. And I don't think that we can then go, well, that's all right, we're done with that now. Let's just go back to pen and paper. I think that we should absolutely be keeping those things and evolving like the world is evolving. Having said that, I do think that we need to keep a very close eye on the research that's coming out in terms of social interaction and work-life balance, because I found that during that period, and I say during that period, we haven't completely gone back, have we? But I found that particularly during that time, I wasn't able to manage when I was stepping away from the computer. And I think that is something we really need to be keeping a close eye on the research and our own practices as professionals to make sure that we're able to manage a work-life balance. And I'm sure Rachel will enlighten me in a few minutes as to how that's been managed in my online schooling. But also, I know that some of the concerns that our parents had was the amount of screen time that students were getting. So we had a few competitions that we'd enter students for, and the parents said, well, that's a whole day of the student being there, staring at the computer, you know. So again, but I know that Jet has kind of alluded to that in terms of allowances being made for downtown as well. So I think absolutely we keep evolving, we keep powering on, just keeping an eye on the research and adapting so the young people are getting the best possible experience from that hybridity that has always kind of grown and been there.
Yeah, you're right, aren't you? The moves have just been accelerated because of the pandemic, I suppose, in terms of the uptake and the skill set of an entire profession, which had to upskill rapidly. And you're right, we don't want to lose that, do we, as a profession? You don't want to lose that skill set, so they have to be using those skills in some way going forward. Jet, coming to you, interesting as a parent in the system at the moment, interested to know what you think education will look like in 20 years' time, 30 years' time. Do you think that it will be very different? Do you think it will have evolved? It will have moved on? Do you think there will be more technology, or do you think it's going to be a slower process than that?
I think a bit of both. I think a slow process because we've seen that in the past, that it's difficult to change education. It's a slow process, and but I think the new technologies are so broad, and there's so many options that I think even the youth will teach us and tell us to not stay behind on that because there's just too much going on right now, and I think we should listen to the youth especially. And also I'd like to say the hybrid way of teaching would be amazing because a lot of kids would have a better balance. There would be a great balance between a brick and mortar school and an online school. So if that would be an option, I think for many kids it would be amazing.
Yeah, you're right, aren't you? The things that my kids can do on computers and iPads now, far beyond what I can do. The digital literacy that they're surrounded by is really important for the future, but it also is really impressive. And actually, we need to make sure that we update and adjust the education system to meet them rather than perhaps rerunning the education system that we had.
Exactly. I agree. Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Rachel, we're going to come to you then as well, because really important point that she was talking about there was for staff as well. You don't have that physical staff room to go into every day to see colleagues face to face. How do you manage that as an online teacher, and what are the benefits of the way of working in an online school, perhaps?
Sure. Well, I think as in any school, organisation is extremely important. Time management, organisation, just making sure that you are well prepared for your students coming in at the beginning of the day, whether it be online or in a physical school. So I don't see that as a huge difference, really. I think it does take a bit of getting used to, Chia. You're right there. But I think it's just important to have those times when you switch off and you do have that work-life balance. So at the end of the day, once you've done your marking and you want to make sure that everybody's okay, reply to any messages, whether they be from other staff members or from family members or from the pupils themselves, it's having that moment then to say, okay, that's it for the day. Certainly, I try to make sure that that's the case, most definitely.
Yeah, you're right, aren't you? Again, whether it's physical or online schools, we know at the moment, don't we, teachers' well-being and workload, the recruitment, the retention difficulties in education generally is such an important topic. And having that ability, that skill set really to be able to say, that's me done, I'm done today, that's such an important one, both for students and young people in terms of their schooling compared to other aspects of life, but also for staff as well. Really useful. Rachel, interested to know, obviously you've been now in an online school, you were for many years in a physical school. Do you see yourself going back to a physical school one day, or do you think actually the benefits of the online school is where you want to stay?
I must admit, I do love online teaching. The flexibility of that is fantastic, obviously, from a personal point of view. But I also love the fact that I am able to teach pupils from all around the world. And that is such a real pleasure and privilege to be able to do that. In a classroom, I've got, pupils who are friends, who are preparing for My Online School has got talent, and somebody was living in the south of England, and somebody was living in, I think he was in Ghana at the time, and to see those relationships, to see those friendships, and for them to say towards the end of my lesson, when are we catching up? Are we going to catch up after this or after next lesson? When are we going to practice our music piece together? And that's a real privilege for me. So yeah, I'm certainly enjoying it.
Yeah, it's incredibly rich, isn't it, when you go into a virtual classroom and you have a student in Birmingham debating with a student in Mexico, debating with a student in Spain, debating with a student in Kenya. That richness of the conversation, you just couldn't replicate anywhere else. It is incredible when you have that interaction.
Rob, can I just step in here? Just say, Rachel, I completely, Rob knows that's one thing that I absolutely love about the system. I mean, we're just such the teaching where I teach is just so multicultural, and you think I'm an English teacher, and so just taking a literature test and just being able to see it across nations, across contexts is just something that I'm very, very jealous of.
There's always online schooling, Chi, as well. Yeah, there's always an option. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. The results of our third poll are in. So the third poll was, will physical schools be sustainable in the future? 14% say yes. And that means, of course, that 86% say no. Interesting that, isn't it? Because we talk about, quite rightly, cost of living crisis and difficulties, but schools are not exempt from that. If you look at many countries around the world now with rising energy prices, that's going to have a real impact on physical schools, budgets and energy costs. Chi, are physical schools sustainable in the current system, in the current model into the future?
I think we're going to have to be looking in the very distant future to say that they're not sustainable. I don't think it's something that's in the near future at all. Having said that, even things like, speaking from where I am from, the strikes, the tube strikes caused considerable disruption to the quality of provision we were able to give the young people, and also things like I know some schools are under PFI contracts, and that puts a strain on their finances and their budgets as a school, and also thinking about the petrol. All these things are finding a way to disrupt the provision, and with every cohort that passes, that is a significant disruption in that young person's life. So I do think that there are cracks beginning to show, and I think as the population grows, those cracks are being ever more visible and perhaps spreading a lot deeper. And the more we move towards a globalized curriculum, a globalized provision for the young people, they will get deeper and deeper. Is it in the near future? I do not think so at all, but we're on wobbly. I think it's wobbly at the moment.
You're right, and it requires a lot of funding as well, doesn't it, to maintain physical schools. I remember being in a physical school, taking over as a head teacher in a physical school, and I think the first weekend I woke up because I had a phone call saying the boiler room was on fire, and in the winter the pipes would freeze, and all of those bits as well. It's a real juggling act for leaders in physical schools when perhaps you haven't got the physical resources that you would ideally have if you could build from scratch your own school chief. Yeah, let's go to Jet. I'm interested, Jet, in terms of your experiences in an international school as well as an online school as well. Do you think physical schools in their current format are sustainable? Do you think they're going to be able to keep going in terms of that?
I don't think so. I agree with Chi and with the things you said. But again, it's such a tough concept, school. It's such a building, and it has to change in people's minds. And I think the leaders of the countries and the leaders of the schools should go and think otherwise and see where this could go, and with the pupil in mind, because it's not about money, it's about the kids and about the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rachel, are physical schools sustainable? How would you have voted in that poll?
I think I most certainly would have voted that they're not sustainable, but I tend to agree with Chi and Jet there that perhaps that's going to take some time. It's certainly not going to be an overnight change, is it? But I'm quite sad to hear at times recently, we're back to normal. That's it, we're back to normal. And normal is this, very traditional setting and process, and I think there's an awful lot we can do to improve upon that. We've learned that over the last couple of years. Yes, there were challenges, certainly, but we can take all of those elements that did work and that certainly we are finding are working online, and to make the process more successful for our young people and families. We are educating young people for the future, for this digital literate society that we are living in. And therefore, I think education needs to move with what is happening in the workplace and not just stay in the past centuries.
It's really interesting to hear the feedback from the whole panel. I think there are some real clear areas of common ground. That idea that actually we need to make sure that our education system is able to be personalised towards the needs of the individual, that requires a range of different schooling options so that people have real choice over the type of schooling that is right for them, for their child, for themselves. I think that we've talked about the idea that technology is here to stay, and it's about how we harness that technology in any setting in order to empower young people to thrive. So a really rich discussion. Thank you, everyone. Just before we head into the question and answer section today, we have one more poll for those of you watching today. You've heard from our experts, you've heard from one of our families as well who've experienced my online schooling. So our final question is a simple one. Would you consider sending your child to an online school? Would you consider sending your child to an online school? Give you a couple of minutes, everyone, to respond to that poll. Really interesting final poll for us to reflect on when we get the results through. What we're going to do now, though, is we're going to open up the panel to not my questions, but your questions. So we're going to pull up some questions. Thank you to all of you who have submitted questions throughout the session today. And we are going to go through these a really good set of questions, actually. So the first one that I will take, thank you for this question. At what age do you think online schooling is most appropriate or effective? What a great question that is. So here at My Online Schooling, we have year 3 all the way through to year 13, but it'd be interesting to get a parent perspective on this. Jay, what age do you think young people would do best in an online school?
Good question, because Ginger attended when she was 14. So that was, a year and a half ago. But if I would have known before, a couple of years earlier would have been great for her. I think from 7, 8, I would really consider. Before the age of that, I think as a parent, you'd have to be there with the child mostly, but I don't speak out of experience, so I really couldn't tell. But I believe even earlier, it just depends on the child again. I think you have to really look at your child and see if this is something for them.
Yeah, Chi, what about your views? What age would a young person get most benefit from online learning?
I think, speaking as a parent, I know certainly that my child is quite young to be thinking in that direction. He and his social language is very physical, so I think that he would struggle in an online setting. Speaking as a teaching professional, I think that when people sometimes talk about online schooling, sometimes, I'm not saying that this is the general view, they mention the social aspect, students with perhaps anxiety, students who have suffered in a previous experience, physical experience, etc. And so I would look at that secondary school as a turning point and to make that decision that actually you've had the experience of a physical experience in primary school. Would you like to continue in that way? And I think that at that age, to a great extent, the student is able to articulate their viewpoint on that. So I would say if we're thinking about a starting point, I'd certainly say experience primary school and the physical in that sense, and then have that shift perhaps in secondary school.
Really interesting. Again, it comes back to that what's right for the individual. I think I mentioned earlier that I have 4 children. They are all junior school age. And what's really exciting for us is that one of our children is actually starting at My Online Schooling. And he is going to be part of My Online Schooling. And we can't wait to experience that as parents as well. So again, it comes back to the individual, but certainly the real privilege in the junior school and the relationships as well. They are just incredible to build, and for young people to have a certain level of skill set, particularly with technology at a young age as well. It was a great question. Thank you for submitting that one. The next question here, how do you deal with different time zones when it comes to teaching in online schools? Now, that is a very good question. We run a timetable at My Online Schooling that operates across a global time zone. So we have classes that start in terms of British time as early as 4 a.m. And classes that stretch throughout the day to try and make it as accessible to as many different time zones around the world as possible. And when students enroll with us with their families, of course, they get support and guided towards picking those classes that are at the best times for them and their families as well. But a really good practical question. Another question here, how big are class sizes in My Online Schooling? And is there much one-to-one teaching? Rachel, how big are class sizes?
So our maximum class size is 20, which is a really nice size. It's obviously quite a lot smaller than most class sizes you would find across the world, certainly in the UK. Many of our classes may only have 10, 15 students in, but certainly the maximum is 20. And that's a great number to be able to get around the classroom, to speak to students one-to-one, to give them that time to really progress and to support them individually.
Chi, how do classes of 15 or 20 sound to you in a physical school?
Oh wow, that would be amazing.
Is in about, I think it links to that second part of the question about one-to-one as well. And I'm sure just the same in physical school, Cheese, at My Online Schooling, there are one-to-one opportunities, particularly for our inclusion department as well, social skills, mentoring programs one-to-one, anxiety management classes one-to-one, and some study skills as well. And Chi, there'll be a range of one-to-ones, sort of classes or sessions or interventions that you would have seen, I'm sure. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Next question that came in. Are young people expected to do the same hours online as in a physical school? Do pupils attend full time? It's another really good question. Yes, the vast majority of our students study with us full time. They cover all of their subjects or their qualifications with us. Absolutely the case in our junior school, where students have the same teacher for all of their lessons, just like they would in a traditional primary setting as well. And that means they get the full national English curriculum delivered in exactly the same way. So there's no narrowness, there's no limited scope in terms of that curriculum offer. And going up the school, the same is true in Key Stage 3. Students have different teachers for different subjects, but it's the full curriculum that is offered to our students. And of course, into Key Stage 4 and 5, that's where students will pick how many qualifications that they will study for. Jet, how many qualifications is Ginger studying for?
This year, 7.
Brilliant. What's Ginger's favourite subject, Jet?
Oh, well.
You on the spot.
She has 4 favourites: English Lit, English Language, Biology, and History.
Brilliant. And she will be very happy because she's an English teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, so it is full-time study. The hours of lessons per week may not be, they vary in physical schools as well as online schools. Of course, as Jet alluded to earlier, we make sure that students have broken up timetables, so there's not too much time on screen in any one day. And of course, as Rachel alluded to earlier as well, the progress that students make in their lessons tends to be an accelerated pace because there are fewer distractions, and perhaps you maximize the full 60 minutes of a lesson without the having to pack up at the end, tidy up, walk in the room 5 minutes late, get across the school physically. So every minute is very much focused on teaching and learning. It's another really good question. Let's go for another question. What level of support is given to children who are neurodiverse with dyslexia or dyspraxia? That's a really good question for any school, and whether it's a physical school or an online virtual school, schools should have a provision for students with additional needs. So My Online Schooling has a fully qualified Senko who sits on our senior leadership team. We have a director of inclusion, we have a head of well-being, we have a school counsellor, and we also have teaching assistants who go into classes to support students on a one-to-one basis, in addition to the capped class sizes that Rachel talked about a moment ago. So quite a lot of provision in place to support young people with additional learning needs. In fact, the proportion of students with an additional learning need within My Online Schooling is higher than the average in a physical school. So our young people, a significant proportion of our cohort are students who have additional learning needs and are able to thrive with the support that is given to them. What software is used in an online school? It's a good question. What does it look like? How do students get into lessons? Rachel, how do students get into your lessons?
So we have a piece of software called Canvas, which students have all of the links for their lessons. They have their modules on there. They have any independent work which is set for them on there as well. And they have links on there which bring them to their Zoom lesson. So that is set up for the time when their lesson is with the correct teacher and what have you. And they just click on that link there and join straight to us, and they're straight in their lesson.
Brilliant. And Rachel, all lessons are live?
All lessons are live, however, they are recorded as well. So any pupils who perhaps are not able to join the lesson live, they may have something on at home, or it might be that they are just not able to join that day. Then they can watch that recording back as well and catch up on anything that they may have missed.
Brilliant. What a great way to revise as well. I'm sure Ginger will be using those recorded lessons. Jet, how does Ginger find the software, logging on to lessons? Does she find that forward?
Easy. Yeah, she had some online lessons in lockdown before she attended My Online Schooling. It was not completely new, but the software it never has something happened. So as we are on an island, sometimes, as I told Matthew, we have some storms here and no Wi-Fi, nothing. And then she'll have to, like Rachel said, look at the lessons later. So that has never been a problem at all.
Brilliant. I'm really pleased to hear that. That's great. Next question was, how do you teach subjects like drama online? Well, we've seen how art is taught online, but in terms of drama, I've actually been into some drama lessons just before the end of the last academic year. Absolutely superb. Young people with their cameras on, with their audio on, taking up different parts, acting it out in sequence. Really strong performance. We also had a fantastic London theatre company that came into the school towards the end of the academic year and ran workshops virtually for all of our Key Stage 3 students at the time. Fantastic to see that level of expertise and that exposure to a professional theatre company and how many young people, regardless of where they lived, had access to that quite elite London-based theatre company. So yeah, drama is a very successful subject within My Online Schooling. How many teachers are at My Online Schooling? Yeah, it's a good question. It's not just Rachel. Rachel is superb, but it's not just Rachel. We do have over 50 teachers within My Online Schooling, specialised in secondary school. All of our teachers are fully qualified teachers. They are qualified teacher status teachers, and they are specialised in their subjects. And of course, our junior school teachers are qualified primary school practitioners as well. So plenty of teachers that you get to meet and build relationships with and thrive because of their teaching and learning. There's another question. Thank you for these questions. Are we able to listen to a lesson to get an idea of how teaching is delivered? Absolutely. If you go to our website, you can make contact with our admissions team. We run a number of open events where we actually have sessions like this where you can come along, and part of the session is to experience a lesson at My Online Schooling. We run separate ones for junior school and for secondary school. So please do visit our website, go through to our admissions team, and they can set you up with an opportunity to come along to one of our open events at the school. Brilliant. I think that now closes the questions, but what a good range of questions. Thank you so much indeed. There is, of course, the final poll that we put out a few moments ago. And the poll was, would you consider sending your child to an online school? Drum roll moment, big question, big set of results here. We are delighted to say that 91% of you in attendance today would consider sending your child to an online school, and 9% maybe. So we're looking forward to converting the 9% out there to make sure that everyone considers it to be a viable option if, of course, it is right for your child and your family as well. So what a great way to finish the polls today. Unfortunately, everybody, we are out of time now. But before I go, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you for watching at home, to all who submitted questions, to all of you who completed the polls as well. And a big thank you, of course, to Jet, to Rachel, and to Chi for joining us. I hope that you've enjoyed the show, that you found it useful. You can watch the event on demand if you want to go back and have a look at the discussion that we've had today. And if you have any further questions or want to inquire about online schooling, please see the link that's appearing on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to welcoming you back to a future virtual event. On behalf of everyone at My Online Schooling, take care. Thank you.